phenomenon, but that doesn't mean that, what they had seen wasn't a screen for something else. I mean, just because you saw, I don't believe that just because you've seen a UFO means that you've been abducted. Some people think that. I don't think that has to be true. So, yeah, I mean, maybe, especially when you think about when they saw them, like let's say you need to, fly this what would, otherwise be a very conspicuous craft or something at, 6 a.m., which was when one of the pterosaur sightings was near Gary. Which it was light out then. People are starting their morning commute. Certainly the guy I talked to saw there were other cars on the road. And so, you have to do something right then. It's going to be fairly conspicuous. And yeah, I mean, you have to put something up. So yeah, I mean, I guess that makes a certain amount of sense. You concoct this false image of something either so terrifying or so outside of normal experience that people don't even want to, they don't even want to talk about it. They don't want to report it. They don't want to do anything with it. Because I'll tell you, I think, especially in today's climate, people are more likely to report a UFO sighting than they are to report something like a 30-foot wingspan pterosaur. Because these people that I talk to, the only reason they come forward, often they've been sitting on these sightings for years, and the only reason they come forward is if and when they see that somebody else has. Because otherwise, they're ready to go to their grave never talking about it. So it really seems like if you were trying to mask something, that might not be a bad way to go, because people don't want to report pterosaurs. People will report a UFO, with people coming out, government officials, Navy pilots and stuff talking about them. People will absolutely have no problem talking about seeing a UFO. They've lost a lot of their ridicule,
You're right. Hey, Tobias, I hate to say it, we're coming up with the final break. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. Since we're going 3 hours now and we're feeding out to more radio stations, I have to do the breaks. We'll be back. We'll be back. We'll be back in 3 minutes. That'll give me enough time to get rid of all the tea and get back here. So we'll be back in about 3 minutes. So tell your friends also about Night Dreams Talk Radio. We'll be back shortly.
The roof of Broadcasting Building, New York City. The bells you hear are ringing to warn the people to evacuate the city as Martians approach. Estimated in the last 2 hours, 3 million people have moved out along the roads to the north. Hutchison River Parkway is still kept open for motor traffic. Avoid bridges to Long Island, hopelessly jammed. All communication with Jersey Shore closed 10 minutes ago.
Não perde tempo escolhendo uma roupa, porque no fim eu sei que vou tirar. Fala tchau pro seu batom na boca e fala oi pra quem te faz pirar. Se você já tá com a mesma sensação, pode vir, eis que eu dou um bugão. Tá descontrolada toda essa cara e não para porque a coisa ficou mara. Vou te ganhar no cansaço, no cansaço, no cansaço. Vamos fazer um regaço, um regaço, um regaço. Colarinha dos amassos, amassos, amassos. seu batom na boca e fala oi pra quem te faz pirar. Se você já tá com a mesma sensação, pode vir, que eu tô indo não. Tá descontrolada toda essa tara e não para porque a coisa fica mara. Vou te ganhar no cansaço, no cansaço, no cansaço. Vamos fazer um regaço, um regaço.
Ladies and gentlemen, here it is, the most listened to radio show on the planet. Even the other stations are tuned in too.
You are listening to Night Dreams Talk Radio Network, from our compound to you worldwide, with your host, Gary Anderson.
Well, that is me. Well, I'll tell you, it's a big difference from going a 1 hour show to a 3 hour show. Our guest tonight is Tobias Wayland. He is an expert on cryptics and stuff like that. Hey, Tobias, are you there?
I sure am, Gary.
Yeah, I sometimes, like I mentioned earlier, I think, and the reason why I say that, because I told you once before, or maybe twice before, I had the guest on one time that wrote a book. He was a game warden, and he, wrote a book about owls. But what got him to write this book about owls is that he saw a bunch of grays coming to his house. He was in his bedroom. He lived in a secluded area, so he didn't worry about closing the curtains. And he saw these like 4 or 5 little gray creatures come walking down the driveway and walked right through the window or through the wall. And that's all he remembered. But after that, all of a sudden he started seeing, owls. And so, he wrote this book, and it's a good book on owls. But I confronted him on the show. I said, do you ever think when you were undoubtedly abducted, if these grays came in your room, that they abducted you and maybe they implanted in your brain that every time you see an alien, you don't see a gray, you see owls?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. Certainly, I think that matches what other people have described. Like you'll talk to some experiencers who will talk about having maybe a very realistic imaginary friend when they're a kid, or being visited by like a clown or something in their room one night, and sort of later in life they look back on that and they'll go, well, I don't think I really was visited by a clown in my room when I was 4. I think it was something else that made itself look that way, because, after a lifetime of abduction experiences, I think that there's just no way that's a coincidence, So yeah, I don't have any problem believing that. I think it's interesting too when you talk about specifically owls as screen memories, and that's one that I think has at least become more sort of commonly reported or talked about anyway. The appearance of an owl is already pretty similar to what people are describing when they're talking about grays.
They are.
If you've come face to face with an owl, they have these big, dark, piercing eyes, and their head's kind of the right shape, and they're pretty spooky looking. So, yeah, I mean, I could see that. I mean, I don't know like what the mechanism would be, of course, that anybody would use to create screen memories or anything similar, but I would think that it's probably an easier transition from gray to owl than it would be from gray to harmless party clown. So yeah, I mean that makes a certain amount of sense.
Yeah, it at least it does to me. I mean, it's no different than, I guess you can sit there and come up with a whole bunch of theories, but we really don't even really know what these, if they are aliens, what they actually look like, how tall they are, and what their agenda is with us humans. I just got a funny feeling they're not here, like I've told you many times. I don't think they're here to serve mankind. They got their own motive behind it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I would agree with that completely. Yeah, and, I know you and I have talked about this multiple times, but, I really can't stress enough, frankly. I mean, I think anybody who would treat people the way that these abduction experiencers are being treated can't be benevolent. I mean, there's just, you can spin it however you want, but when you're talking about abducting people from their homes, terrifying them, conducting medical experiments, all of the things that people describe, these aren't good acts. These aren't the acts of something that we would consider particularly ethical, that's for sure. So, yeah, I mean, that's, I don't think that's inaccurate at all. There are those people out there. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, if they were here to help mankind, I don't think we would be going through the melting of Antarctica, the climate changes, all this stuff is going on fastly now. I mean, it's sure strange, too, asteroids, coming by Earth. In the last couple months, it seems like there's been more reported of huge ones just barely missing us. And it's just like, it's a lot of weird things going on all at the same time.
Yeah, I don't know if you've been keeping up with the mystery boom phenomenon that's been happening like the past few years. Or it seems like maybe it's being reported more the last few years, but there really isn't any blanket explanation for all of these. Basically, what happens is people hear these loud booms, and it'll be entire towns, like whole neighborhoods will hear these booms. Their houses will shake, their windows will rattle. Sometimes it's like they're preceded by flashes of light, but not necessarily always. And it's really weird, and nobody really nobody has been able to come up with any explanation that worked for all of these. But one of them that is probably one of the more popular explanations is bolide meteors exploding in the atmosphere. And so, just sort of thinking about that, okay, so let's say, we are talking about, meteors exploding in our atmosphere. I mean, doesn't it seem like with the frequency that these mystery booms are being reported now, that's a whole lot of meteors. I mean, we're talking about, probably at least 10 or 15 of these a year, I would guess, maybe slightly less than that. I don't want to put my foot in my mouth if I go back and count, but it's a lot. And that's just what's being reported. And, it's not just us. Like, a lot of these I'll find through, just the local news. Like if you look at local news at different, places in the U.S., you'll see these stories because it's something real that's happening to real people, and it's really unexplained. And there's no blanket explanation, and there's really no agency that has looked into these, into this phenomenon even. Like nobody's even really looking at it to try to figure out what it is.